Beryl is a master swordsman, perhaps the greatest alive, though he's never thought of himself that way. Now in his 40s, he leads a quiet life managing the family dojo tucked away in a rural village, far from the noise of fame or glory. One morning, while he's practicing in the yard like always, his father watches with a sigh, wishing aloud for grandchildren to brighten up the place. It's been a long time since Beryl inherited the dojo, but when it comes to his love life, nothing has really changed. He's just as unattached now as he was then. He tells his father he's simply been too busy running the dojo to focus on relationships or settling down, but the old man won't drop the subject. Half teasing, he even suggests Beryl train a promising young woman and make her his wife, but Beryl immediately rejects the idea, saying it's completely inappropriate. This dojo has been in their bloodline for ages, and Beryl has devoted himself to preserving its traditions and legacy. There was once a time when he dreamed of becoming a legendary swordmaster, a name known across the land. And though he's far beyond the skill of most, Beryl never saw himself as someone who deserved that kind of recognition. Still, he takes great pride in his role as a mentor. Many of his former students have gone on to make names for themselves, and that, more than anything, keeps him going. That evening, as the day winds down, Beryl joins his parents for dinner. His father, relentless as ever, brings up the subject of marriage again. He even tries to rope in his wife to back him up, but she takes a more gentle stance. She says there's no need to rush, though she does admit she'd love to see a grandchild someday. That comment nearly makes Beryl choke on his food. It's a nice idea in theory, but it's not like he's got anyone in his life, not even a hint of a romantic interest. Beautiful women don't just appear at your door out of nowhere. Except, right on cue, there's a knock. When Beryl opens the door, he finds a striking woman waiting outside. She bows politely and addresses him with respect. It takes him a moment, but he recognizes her, Ilusha Citrus, one of his most talented former students. He welcomes her in and pours tea as they catch up. He remembers how gifted she was back then, focused, sharp, and full of promise. What surprises him now is learning that she's become the commander of the Royal Knight Order. Naturally, he asks what brings her all the way out here. Ilusha explains that as commander, she's responsible for overseeing new recruit training. After considering her options, she decided to recommend Beryl for the role of sword instructor. And not just a casual suggestion, her endorsement was approved as an official imperial decree. That's why she came in person to deliver the news. Beryl never asked for such a position, and his first reaction is to decline. But before he can speak, his father jumps in with a warning. Refusing an order from the Empire might not just be rude, it could be dangerous. Ilusha quickly tries to ease the tension, assuring Beryl that no one's going to execute him over it. Still, declining would have its consequences, so accepting might be the wiser choice. She then mentions that a carriage is already waiting to take them to the capital, and she'll explain the specifics of his new role tomorrow. Beryl is taken aback by how sudden this all is, but his father doesn't seem bothered in the slightest. In fact, he waves Beryl off cheerfully, joking that he should enjoy his time in the capital, and maybe even find a nice girl while he's at it. To make things more awkward, he loudly suggests that Ilusha wouldn't be a bad option. Flustered, Beryl tells him to stop, especially since it's clearly making Ilusha uneasy. Not to mention the age gap between them. Still, Ilusha mutters under her breath that she wouldn't exactly be opposed. Regardless, Beryl isn't interested in seeing what might happen if he declines the offer, so he reluctantly agrees to go. On the carriage ride, he notices something familiar. Ilusha is carrying the same sword he once gave her. It's the standard blade he presents to every student who completes training at his dojo, a symbol of achievement. Somehow, she's kept it in perfect shape all these years. He finds it touching that she's held onto it, though he admits he never thought such a basic weapon was worthy of a knight commander. He suggests she could easily get a better one made, but Ilusha disagrees. She insists the sword is just right for her. Beryl figures she's saying that out of lingering respect, like she still puts too much value in things from her former teacher. But to him, he's just an ordinary swordsman. He doesn't see himself as someone qualified to hold a prestigious teaching role. That's when Ilusha grins and teases him, saying it's about time the country-born sword instructor made his appearance in the capital. Beryl gives her a confused look, wondering who she's even talking about. He's not a bumpkin, and he certainly doesn't think of himself as a swordmaster, but she disagrees. Whether he accepts it or not, his name has spread among sword-fighting circles. Many of his students have gone on to become respected fighters and adventurers. In certain circles, he's somewhat of a legend, though she admits she's not a fan of the nickname people have given him. Beryl laughs it off, not really buying into it. In his eyes, Ilusha's probably the only one who still believes he's anything special. Before long, they reach the royal capital. Ilusha drops him off at a quiet inn, telling him to rest up, she'll be back in the morning to collect him. And sure enough, she returns as promised and brings him to the castle, where he's formally introduced to the Knight Order. Standing before the assembled recruits, Ilusha proudly declares that Beryl's skill is so great that even she wouldn't stand a chance against him. The recruits should consider themselves lucky to train under someone like him. Not everyone seems impressed, though some of them exchange skeptical looks, and one recruit in particular doesn't bother hiding his dissatisfaction. It's obvious that not all of them believe he deserves the role. Later, as Beryl and Ilusha stroll through the castle halls, she congratulates him on officially becoming a special instructor. She explains that his schedule won't be too demanding, he'll only need to train the recruits a few times each month. That way, he can keep things running smoothly at the dojo without throwing his routine into chaos. Just then, a girl rushes over, practically glowing with enthusiasm. She calls out to him with a cheerful master, like she's been waiting forever to reunite, and in her case, she kind of has. Her name is Kiruni, and she was once a student of Beryl's, about 2 years ago. He remembers her ambition clearly, she dreamed of becoming a knight. Now here she is, wearing the trainee armor of the Knight Corps, one step closer to her goal. Though she's still far from full knighthood, she's thrilled to be back training under Beryl's guidance. Ilusha is just as excited, seeing a familiar face returning with such determination. Later that day, Beryl makes his way home, expecting a quiet night. But as he opens the door, he's greeted by a familiar presence, another one of his old students. It's Randreed, and this time he isn't alone. Randreed has brought along his wife and their newborn child to introduce them. Beryl is genuinely happy to see how well things have turned out for him, but before he can say much, his father cuts in with his usual bluntness. He jokes, though not entirely likely, that Beryl shouldn't come back until he's settled down with a wife and child too, just like Randreed. Turns out, Randreed didn't just start a family, he also reached the rare rank of Platinum Adventurer since leaving the dojo, an incredible achievement. But now that he's become a father, Randreed has decided it's time to hang up his gear and return to the village life. Beryl is surprised that someone would walk away from such a prestigious title, but at the same time, he understands, adventuring and family life don't always mix well. During their talk, Randreed casually mentions he plans to help out at the dojo. Beryl, a bit puzzled, asks what he means, and that's when his father drops the real news. He's already decided Randreed will take over as the dojo's new instructor, meaning there's no need for Beryl to stay. In other words, Beryl's just been ousted from his own home, even though technically, the property belongs to him. The following day, Beryl fills Ilusha in on the whole situation. He admits he's going to need a new place to live in the city. The inn he stayed at the previous night was way too upscale to be a long-term option, so he's hoping to find something more affordable. Ilusha immediately offers to help him search. Half teasing, she suggests he could stay at her place, but Beryl quickly declines, saying it wouldn't be proper. The disappointment on her face is clear, though she doesn't press the issue. Trying to keep things upbeat, she asks if he'd at least like to grab a meal together. Beryl agrees, and the two start making their way to a nearby restaurant. But before they get far, someone suddenly yells at Ilusha, accusing her of being inappropriate for walking around with a man and calling him master in public. The voice belongs to a young woman who clearly has some past with Ilusha, and not a good one. She's visibly offended that the Knight Commander would be seen casually walking with what she sees as a nobody. Beryl, wanting to avoid trouble, lowers his gaze and says nothing. But the girl won't leave it alone. She steps right up to him and pulls down his mask, demanding to see his face. The moment she gets a look at him, her entire expression changes. She calls him master, too. Beryl, caught off guard, doesn't recognize her at first. But she quickly reminds him her name is Serena, and years ago, he saved her and taught her the basics of swordsmanship. It takes him a moment, but then the memories begin to return. He recalls the day he discovered a gravely injured girl nearly 20 years ago. Taking her under his care, he nursed her back to health and introduced her to the fundamentals of swordsmanship. Time passed, and their paths diverged, with no contact in over 10 years. So when he learns that she has risen to the rank of a black-level adventurer, genuine surprise washes over him. Serena, the woman in question, apologizes for the long absence but wastes no time asking what business has brought him to the capital so suddenly. Ilusha quickly answers, explaining that Beryl has been assigned the role of a special instructor for the Knight's Order, and she's been helping him search for accommodation. Before she can say more, Serena jumps in, arguing that she'd be far better suited to the task. She spent years drifting between inns, after all, and claims she knows all the best spots. It doesn't take long before the two women are locked in a verbal tug-of-war, squabbling over who's more fit to assist Beryl in finding a place to live. Caught in the middle, Beryl is bewildered by the underlying friction between them. Nevertheless, their combined, albeit argumentative, efforts ultimately lead him to a suitable inn that meets his needs. After settling in, Beryl expresses his gratitude to them both. With a weary sigh, he pleads for peace between them, citing his fraying patience after a long day filled with shouting. Out of respect for him, they both fall silent. The three then walk back in quiet companionship. Later, Beryl stands by the window, watching the two women depart in silence. He's not especially fond of the city, the constant bustle isn't his preference, but seeing so many of his former students nearby gives him a sense of familiarity. Perhaps, despite his reservations, he might not feel so alien in this place after all. The next morning, training resumes as usual for the Night Order. On the practice grounds, Vice Commander Henblitz is putting on a display of dominance, besting each sparring partner with swift, exact strikes. It's evident that his skills far exceed the others. Once his match ends, Alicia steps forward with an announcement. There's been a change. Beryl will now oversee training sessions more frequently instead of only once a week. She declares that she, too, will be directly involved from this point onward and urges everyone to give their utmost. Beryl moves to address the group, offering a short introduction and expressing his anticipation in working with them. But before he can begin, Henblitz steps up with something to say. Henblitz informs him that anyone granted the title of Special Instructor must first prove their capability. As a matter of procedure, and without ill will, he formally challenges Beryl to a duel. It's a test of strength, meant to verify Beryl's qualification. As Vice Commander, he has every right to request it, and Alicia quickly gives her approval. Beryl suppresses a sigh, silently wishing Alicia would stop volunteering him for these challenges without warning. But since Henblitz made the demand, there's no turning back now. The Vice Commander suspects Beryl's presence is due more to Alicia's favoritism than actual merit. From his perspective, just because Beryl once mentored her doesn't mean he's still suited for the role. Henblitz intends to settle the matter here and now, by defeating Beryl in front of the entire order. To his own surprise, Beryl finds himself agreeing with much of what Henblitz has said. He's never thought of himself as someone worthy of a title like Special Instructor. But losing now would cast a shadow on Alicia, who went out of her way to support him. For her sake alone, he resolves to give this match everything he's got. The duel kicks off as Henblitz bursts forward, closing the distance between them in a flash. Beryl brings up his blade, meeting the furious flurry of attacks with calm precision. Henblitz is fast, unbelievably fast, and every strike carries crushing force. But Beryl knows the flow of battle. If he can intercept just one blow at the right moment, with the right angle, he can disrupt the rhythm. And that's exactly what he does. With one expertly timed redirection, he breaks Henblitz's balance and slips inside his guard, blade drawn for a finishing move. Henblitz freezes. In a real fight, that would have been a lethal blow. The point goes to Beryl. They return to their starting positions, and Henblitz immediately charges again, this time even quicker than before. His raw strength is undeniable, but despite the power, Beryl reads every move as though it were in slow motion. He meets each attack with practiced ease, countering without hesitation. Realizing brute strength won't be enough, Henblitz finally decides to let loose. He uses his signature move, Roaring Blade, a blinding, high-speed spin attack so forceful that most fighters can't even block it. It's a finishing move. But just as it comes crashing down, Beryl disappears. In a breath, he reappears behind Henblitz, his sword resting calmly at the man's neck. That's it. Match over. Beryl wins. Henblitz doesn't look angry, just amazed. He concedes with grace and apologizes for underestimating him. Later that evening, he throws a small party to formally welcome Beryl as the knight's new instructor. Even as the celebration winds down, Henblitz can't stop wondering, how did Beryl counter that technique? When he finally asks, Beryl humbly explains he moved with a spin, letting the momentum guide him to Henblitz's blind spot. Pulling that off, though, takes flawless timing and instincts honed by experience. Henblitz chuckles, impressed by how simple Beryl makes it sound. Regardless, he's excited to learn under someone like that, and the rest of the recruits feel the same way. About a week later, two knights are sparring on the training field when Beryl strolls over to offer some advice. He's been watching them for a while and points out an issue with their spacing. He shows how overfocusing on your opponent's weapon can leave you open, giving them a chance to step in before you react. It might sound minor, but in real combat, half a step could be the difference between life and death. To Beryl, it's just a helpful tip, but the way the knights look at him, you'd think he'd revealed a sacred truth. Ever since the duel, they've treated every word from him like it's gospel. Truthfully, Beryl couldn't complain, training had been a lot smoother lately. Once the session wrapped up, he sat down to cool off. Henblitz approached him and passed over a towel. Beryl accepted it with a nod, wiping away the sweat. Not long after, Kiruti wandered over and casually asked if he had plans after this. He hadn't really thought about it, and his nonchalant answer was all she needed. With a grin, she offered to show him around the city a bit. It struck him then that he hadn't actually seen much of Baltrain, so he figured, why not? Kiruti lit up with enthusiasm and rushed off to change into more relaxed clothes. Meanwhile, Alicia was immersed in a series of meetings with royal officials, updating them on the current state of the Knight Order, particularly regarding their new instructor. She reassured them that Beryl was already outperforming expectations. With her report complete, the meeting drew to a close. People had warned her about this position. Becoming captain of the Knights meant more politics, less time for swordsmanship. But she hadn't taken the job for personal glory. She accepted the role because it was the only way to bring Beryl to the capital. Years ago, as a young girl, her parents had enrolled her in Beryl's dojo for self-defense lessons. Even then, she'd sensed that he was someone worth learning from. Under his guidance, she trained rigorously, swinging blades, hopping across logs to hone her footwork, and building her strength with basic but demanding drills. His style was unconventional, but it made wielding a sword feel natural. One day, he invited her to spar, and she jumped at the chance, eager to display her progress. But the moment their duel began, she realized there was no gap in his defense. Growing up under Beryl's tutelage, Alicia assumed every instructor was as skilled as him, until that illusion shattered during a cross-dojo sparring event. Her opponent that day was clumsy and reckless, charging headfirst, no strategy, no patience. She dismantled him easily. The match ended before it could really begin. Later, as the group headed home, Beryl seemed glad his students experienced a variety of fighting styles. Curious, Alicia asked if their dojo was just superior. After all, they'd won every match, even Beryl had bested the other school's master. But Beryl didn't like thinking in terms of superiority. Sure, they won, but what mattered most was what they learned from the match. Alusha understood his point. Then she realized something was missing, her hairpin. She figured she dropped it at the other dojo. Since it was important to her, she ran back to look for it. Once there, she spotted the guy she had defeated earlier. He had it in his hand. For a moment, she thought he'd return it without a fuss. But of course, it wasn't that simple. Instead, he tossed it inside the dojo and said if she wanted it back, she'd have to fight everyone there. He might have lost one-on-one, but now he had backup, and he was sure the odds were in his favor. Given how poorly trained those boys were, Alusha could have easily taken them down herself. But she remembered Beryl's teachings. He wouldn't want her using her skills to fight out of ego. So instead, she planted her feet, ready to take the blow rather than retaliate. Just before the sword could strike her, Beryl stepped in and took the hit in her place. The attack didn't do much to him, though he flinched slightly. Locking eyes with the boys, he asked calmly, "Is this really the kind of swordsman you aim to become?" One of them, still not understanding how foolish he was being, tried to strike Beryl again, this time aiming for his head. But Beryl ducked with ease, and in a swift, fluid motion, disarmed him. Before the rest could react, Beryl was already intercepting their attacks, deflecting each one with precision and restraint. Before the situation could escalate any further, the dojo master burst into the room. Having heard the uproar, he arrived as quickly as he could. The shame on his face said everything. Kneeling before Beryl, he offered a heartfelt apology, vowing that nothing like this would ever happen again under his watch. On the walk back, Beryl and Alusha walked side by side. He admitted that he had a bad feeling when she returned for her hairpin, so he followed just in case. Alusha felt guilty that Beryl took a hit for her, but he reassured her it was nothing serious. She hadn't done anything wrong, and he didn't want her blaming herself. If anything, he held himself responsible for letting her face a risky situation without someone there to guide her. Years passed, and now Alusha was sparring with Beryl again. His skill hadn't diminished in the slightest. But this time, she was able to keep up with him, and for the first time, she managed to land a solid strike. Beryl was sincerely impressed by her progress. He told her she was ready. It was time for her to graduate. With pride, he handed her the ceremonial sword that marked her completion of the dojo's training. By then, Alusha had realized Beryl was completely unaware of how extraordinary he truly was. She didn't want to leave, not because she wasn't ready, but because she felt there was still more to learn from him. Yet, she didn't want to argue or burden him with hesitation. So instead, she made a quiet vow. She would prove to the world that Beryl's teachings were unmatched. That's why she joined the Knight's Order and took the entrance trials. As she expected, no one there could rival the training she had received. Even the examiners found themselves pushed to their limits trying to keep up with her. If they struggled, then they wouldn't have stood a chance against Beryl. His speed, his instinct, his ability to read an opponent before they moved, it was on another level. To Alusha, there was no doubt Beryl was the greatest swordsman alive. But the man himself had no idea. And knowing his nature, he would have been perfectly fine living quietly, without fame or recognition. Alusha, however, refused to let his legacy fade into obscurity. Gradually, she rose through the ranks of the Knight Order, gaining power and respect, driven by one purpose, ensuring the world saw Beryl's brilliance. A full 10 years had passed since she'd last trained under him, and during that time, he'd only grown more extraordinary. Deep down, she still feels a twinge of guilt for assigning him the role of special instructor without consulting him first, but honestly, it was the only way to pull him out of that quiet village and let others witness what she had always known. At the training arena, Alusha approaches Hemblitz to ask how Beryl's session went. Hemblitz beams and says it was incredible. Every trainee walked away with something meaningful. Alusha then scans the area, but Beryl is nowhere to be seen, so she asks if he's already left. Hemblitz casually mentions that Kiruni invited Beryl to take a stroll through town. The moment Alusha hears that, a sharp pang of envy hits her. Kiruni had basically asked him on a casual outing, and now Alusha wishes she'd had the same idea first. Elsewhere, Kiruni is guiding Beryl through the bustling city streets, eagerly pointing out hidden gems and local favorites. Beryl is quietly amazed. Compared to the calm rhythm of his home village, this place overflows with energy. Still, he's puzzled when they head toward the Western District. He assumed the notable landmarks, like the palace and Grand Cathedral, were up north. Kiruni acknowledges that he's right, but explains that after living here so long, those iconic places lose their appeal. You pass them every day, and they stop feeling unique. Beryl nods, though he admits he had been hoping to see them since it was something he'd been curious about. While they walk through the crowded market, Beryl suddenly hears someone call his name. He turns to see a young woman approaching, happily addressing him as master. Clearly, she trained under him at some point, but for the life of him, he can't recall who she is. She seems to know Kiruni well too, but that doesn't jog his memory. Disappointed, the woman gestures toward the sword at her hip, offering a clue. She's one of his former students. Beryl thinks hard, then it hits him. Her name is Fee Sale. She had trained at the same dojo as Kiruni years ago. Back then, she looked so different, it's no wonder he didn't recognize her immediately. It's been 5 years since they last met, and time has clearly transformed her. Judging by her uniform, she's done well, now serving as a high-ranking officer in the capital's magic corps. Beryl is proud, though caught off guard, he doesn't remember ever teaching her anything related to magic. This new path of hers is a surprise. Kiruni asks if Thistle's running errands, and she says she's here to pick up some magical equipment. Beryl looks puzzled at the term, so Sale shows him a device and explains that it's designed to let nearly anyone perform magic. She, of course, doesn't need them, her magical skills are already top tier. Beryl is stunned to hear that. He always knew she had talent, but this level of mastery surprises him. Then again, as a member of the Magic Corps, it does make perfect sense. A sudden commotion breaks the street's calm. A woman shouts, her purse has been snatched. Beryl instinctively readies himself to intervene, but before he can make a move, Sale steps forward with calm confidence. With practiced ease, she draws her sword, infuses it with a surge of magical energy, and releases a sharp arc of force. The energy catches the thief's legs, tripping him hard onto the pavement. Before he can recover, Kiruni descends on him like a shadow and pins him down with professional precision. Beryl watches the scene unfold, quietly impressed. The efficiency of their teamwork stands out, but it's Thistle's magic-infused swordplay that truly catches his attention. It's unlike anything he's seen before. She later tells him that she channels her magic into the blade for enhanced close combat, and thanks him sincerely. His sword training helped her adapt her spells for melee efficiency. Beryl feels a warm pride knowing one of his former students turned that foundation into something remarkable. The following morning, Beryl rises early for a peaceful stroll, a habit he's picked up since staying near Ashton Hall. As he walks through the awakening city, someone unexpectedly calls out his name. He turns to find a small girl standing nearby, staring straight at him. Assuming she's lost, Beryl bends down and gently asks if she needs help finding her parents. To his surprise, she snaps at him for treating her like a child. She boldly claims she's the commander of the Magic Corps. Beryl assumes she's just playing pretend, maybe caught up in some fantasy. He chuckles softly, but the girl's glare sharpens. With a flick of her finger, she conjures an enormous fireball, holding it effortlessly in the air. Beryl's amusement fades. No ordinary child could pull off something like that. She introduces herself, Lucy. Despite her youthful appearance, she insists she's far older than Beryl and doesn't take kindly to being mistaken for a kid. Apparently, Sale had spoken highly of him, almost like a legendary mentor, and that piqued Lucy's interest enough to seek him out. She's clearly impressed by what Sale became under his tutelage and wants to size him up. Beryl brushes off the praise, crediting Thistle's growth to her own dedication and not his involvement. Still, out of courtesy, he continues walking with Lucy. Eventually, she steers him into an open plaza, a telltale sign for any experienced adventurer. She mentions that she trains daily but rarely finds worthy sparring partners. Now that she's finally met this so-called sword master, she wants a proper duel. Before Beryl can object, Lucy hurls a burst of flame in his direction. He's forced to leap back to avoid it. Clearly, she's not asking, this is happening. Beryl sighs, drawing his sword with reluctant readiness. Lucy wastes no time. She launches another massive fireball, forcing Beryl to dodge and sprint across the plaza, slipping between blasts and parrying with measured precision. Each explosive strike meets nothing but air or steel. Realizing her fire assaults aren't enough, Lucy changes her approach. 3 massive orbs of ice materialize above her and launch toward him with thundering force. Despite their massive forms, Beryl effortlessly cleaved through each one with a single, fluid swing of his blade. Watching his remarkable swordplay unfold in real time, Lucy's interest in their clash only deepened. Yet Beryl, eager to end things quickly, lunged at her, his intent not to injure, but to render her unconscious with a well-placed strike from his sword's hilt. Before he could close the distance, Lucy ignited in a sudden blaze, forcing Beryl to leap backward to avoid the searing heat. In that moment, Lucy genuinely feared she'd lose if she let him get too close. Beryl, on the other hand, silently wished he had some magic at his disposal, realizing how difficult it was to handle spells with nothing but steel. But Lucy wasn't about to relent. With a playful smirk, she conjured more fireballs, this time flinging them behind Beryl, steering his movement as he darted and weaved across the field. The sight of him scrambling amused her. It was clear this was Beryl's first real encounter with a magic user. He had no solid tactics prepared. Eventually, the barrage eased, giving him a moment to breathe. Just as he thought the pressure was over, a massive chunk of ice came crashing down from above, aimed directly at him. Beryl caught sight of it in time, meeting it with a sharp strike that sent it flying back toward Lucy. She quickly melted it with a fresh surge of fire, but the resulting burst created a thick mist that blanketed the area. Seizing the moment, Beryl surged forward through the fog to land a critical hit, but was knocked away by a sudden blast of lightning from Lucy. Neither had yet landed a decisive blow, and Lucy's frustration was beginning to show. She hadn't expected such a drawn-out battle. Realizing it was time to finish this, she paused, and Beryl, sensing an opening, started forward. But he froze mid-stride when Lucy summoned a swirling void of dark energy. Beryl didn't know exactly what it was, but instinct warned him not to approach. He stood still, keeping his guard up. After a tense silence, Lucy let out a breath and dispelled the ominous magic. Seeing Beryl remain calm despite such a threatening spell made her realize the fight was unnecessary. With a sheepish tone, she admitted she'd gone overboard and offered to end the duel. Beryl, now visibly relieved, accepted her apology. Facing someone like Lucy had been exhausting. His curiosity got the better of him, though, and he asked what the spell would have done had she unleashed it. With a casual shrug, Lucy explained that it might have torn his body apart. Still, she now understood why Fiesale held Beryl in such high regard. Most people would have collapsed in fear just from seeing it. It was rare for her to meet a swordsman who could remain so composed under pressure. Feeling genuinely sorry for dragging him into such a difficult encounter, she invited him to visit the Magic Institute sometime soon, promising to make it up to him personally. That afternoon, Beryl returned to his routine, once again guiding the students through their training sessions at the hall. During his break, Beryl happened to run into Fiesale in the hallway, who had come to deliver some healing potions from the Magic Institute. She offered one to Beryl, apologizing for Lucy's earlier behavior. Beryl hesitated, knowing how expensive healing potions could be, but Fiesale reassured him it was on the house. Beryl admitted that, up until now, he had almost convinced himself that Lucy was just a normal young girl. Fiesale laughed and explained that Lucy used magic to maintain her youthful appearance, and her true age was a mystery. Despite this, Beryl couldn't help but be amazed by how someone so small could wield such power. He confessed that he genuinely feared for his life during their duel and had no intention of facing another wizard anytime soon. Fiesale, however, assured him that Lucy was an exceptional case. Most wizards couldn't cast spells as quickly or continuously as she could. Fiesale was confident that Beryl could easily hold his own against the average wizard. At that moment, Alusha arrived and interrupted their conversation, informing Beryl that he had a special request waiting for him. Curious, Beryl followed her to another room, where they found Serena. She explained that the Adventurers Guild had specifically asked Beryl to oversee special training sessions for the newest adventurers, preparing them for their first dungeon exploration. The mention of rookie adventurers reminded Beryl of his own youthful aspirations. Once, he had dreamed of becoming an adventurer, eager to discover the treasures hidden in dungeons. But that dream had ended quickly when he was soundly defeated by monsters on his first day and ran back home with his pride shattered. He shared his concerns with Serena and Alusha, pointing out how dangerous adventuring was. But that was exactly why they wanted him to handle the training. They assured him that all the preparations had already been made, and the task would not interfere with his current duties as a special instructor. In other words, there was nothing stopping him from accepting. Ultimately, the decision was his, so Serena suggested he meet with the guildmaster to discuss the job. The Adventurers Guild was nearby, so she led Beryl there immediately. When they entered the guildmaster's office, Beryl was surprised to find Lucy sitting on the couch, waiting for him as if it was completely normal. Apparently, she had heard about the job offer, and since she was close with the guildmaster, she rushed over to meet him again. A moment later, the guildmaster, Nidus, greeted Beryl warmly. After hearing so many positive things about Beryl from both Serena and Lucy, Nidus was certain they had found the perfect candidate. Beryl tried to remind him that he hadn't agreed to take the job yet, but Nidus cheerfully ignored his objections. Nidus gestured to his assistant Megan, instructing Beryl to speak with him about the details of the position. However, before they could go any further, Megan asked Beryl if he had any previous experience as an adventurer. Beryl's honest no to Megan's question left her uncertain about his qualifications to teach new adventurers. Beryl secretly hoped her skepticism would give him an excuse to turn down the offer, but it only riled up Serena and Lucy, who had strongly supported him. Megan calmly clarified that she wasn't questioning Beryl's reputation out of disrespect, but out of concern for the safety of the adventurers, especially since strange monster activity had been reported. Magnus, understanding Megan's point, asked what Beryl would need to do to prove his worth. Megan suggested that if Beryl could defeat Serena in a duel, she would recognize his qualifications. Serena eagerly agreed, leaving Beryl with no way to back out. With the decision made, Nidus set up the duel immediately. Soon, the training grounds were filled with a lively crowd, eager to see the renowned Serena in action and curious about her opponent. Serena, thrilled at the chance to spar with her mentor, stood ready, excited for the challenge. Serena's past was a painful one. When she was young, her family was traveling with a merchant caravan. Tragedy struck when the caravan was ambushed by a monstrous beast that destroyed their carriage. In a desperate attempt to save her, Serena's parents threw her off a cliff, leaving her as the sole survivor. When Serena regained consciousness, the first face she saw was Beryl's. He took her to his home, where he tended to her injuries. Once she was stable, he gently asked about her background, but Serena broke down when the topic of her parents came up. Seeing her distress, Beryl reassured her to rest and not worry about it. With nowhere else to go, Beryl turned to his parents for help. They welcomed Serena into their home, agreeing to care for her until a permanent solution could be found. Over time, Serena became part of the family. Initially shy and withdrawn, she found comfort in Beryl's presence. One day, Beryl was training with his sword outside when he noticed Serena watching him. He invited her to join him, hoping it might help her open up. Serena eagerly accepted, and from then on, she trained with Beryl whenever she could. As Beryl patiently taught her swordsmanship, their bond grew stronger. Soon, Serena was so committed to her training that she would often arrive early, sword in hand, ready for the day's lessons. Beryl, pleased with her dedication, welcomed her into his class, happy to see how much she had grown. Serena had found a new family in Beryl, and she would have been content to stay by his side forever. Years passed, and Serena had grown into a skilled, gold-ranked adventurer. The path that led her here started long ago when a family came forward to adopt her. Although Beryl and his parents agreed that it was best for her future, Serena didn't want to leave, torn between her desire to stay and her sense of not wanting to burden Beryl. With a heavy heart, she left, thanking him for everything. Time moved on, and she became one of the finest in her field. On an escort mission, Serena's caravan was ambushed by bandits led by a renowned swordsman. Her teammate warned her to be careful, but before the warning could fully leave his lips, Serena was already charging into battle. In moments, she had wiped out the entire group of bandits without so much as breaking a sweat. She had two motivations for becoming an adventurer. One was to ensure that no one had to suffer the same fate she had, and the other was to honor Beryl's teachings by putting her newfound skills to use. And now, after 2 decades, she had the chance to face her old mentor in a duel, eager to show him how far she had come. Though Beryl wasn't thrilled about the duel, the gleam of excitement in Serena's eyes couldn't be ignored. As her former master, he knew it was his responsibility to give her a fight that would make a lasting impression. The duel began, and Serena rushed in, her swords flashing in a flurry of swift, precise strikes. Her speed was impressive, but Beryl kept up with each move, blocking or dodging every attack without effort, leaving her unable to land a hit. Serena's enthusiasm only grew as they clashed, savoring the challenge of fighting someone who wasn't holding back. Beryl, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel proud. Serena had clearly dedicated herself to honing her skills over the years, and it was evident in her refined technique. But there was still something in her form that wasn't quite right, a slight stiffness in the way she swung her left hand. It was subtle, but enough for him to exploit. With pinpoint precision, Beryl disarmed her in a fluid motion, sending her sword flying from her grip. Serena tried to respond with a quick strike from her other sword, but Beryl was faster. He swept her legs from under her, leaving her flat on the ground, his blade hovering just above her neck. The duel was over. The audience erupted into applause, and Mijin approached Beryl, apologizing for ever doubting his abilities. Beryl waved it off, understanding the skepticism of someone who had never seen their teacher in action before. With newfound respect, Mijin offered Beryl a position as the guild's special instructor, which Beryl accepted. The very next morning, Beryl found himself standing at the entrance of a dungeon with his new students, Porter, Midri, and Sarlacats. As they ventured in, Sarlacat's magical watch began to glow, signaling the presence of 6 monsters ahead. The students readied themselves for battle, and while Beryl and Serena stood back, watching over them, the 3 adventurers quickly engaged the goblins. Their teamwork was flawless, and the monsters were defeated swiftly. Deeper into the dungeon, everything continued smoothly, and soon they had explored every corner without any major incidents. However, as they made their way back to the entrance, Beryl felt an unsettling sensation. Something wasn't quite right. There seemed to be fewer monsters than he had anticipated. As Porter moved toward the dungeon's exit, his magic watch suddenly shattered with a violent crack, signaling the presence of a force far beyond its detection limits. Beryl's urgent shout to warn Porter came too late. An unseen threat grabbed him, inflicting severe wounds while leaving him barely clinging to life. Beryl and Serena knew they couldn't help Porter immediately. They had to deal with the powerful creature first, and that wouldn't be easy. Before them stood a Xenograbil, a legendary monster infamous for its terrifying strength. Even the most experienced adventurers would struggle to survive a confrontation with one, yet there was no choice but to fight. Beryl and Serena steeled themselves for the battle ahead. Beryl couldn't help but regret taking on this assignment, but at least Serena was here with him. As a black-ranked adventurer, she was more than capable of handling the Griffin, or so he hoped. While she took care of that, Beryl intended to rush to Porter's aid. However, before he could even grab a healing potion, Serena, thinking the same thing, gave him a quick high five and declared that she would handle Porter. Beryl didn't even have time to protest before the Griffin lunged at him, forcing him to dodge with lightning reflexes, leaving him no choice but to fight. The Griffin's claws swiped at him with frightening speed, but Beryl managed to deflect the blows with his sword. Seizing an opening, he aimed for the Griffin's legs, only to find the creature's scales nearly impenetrable. His strike had no effect. Now stuck on the defensive, Beryl's thoughts turned to how long he could hold out until Serena secured Porter's safety. But when he glanced back to check on her, he momentarily dropped his guard, narrowly avoiding the Griffin's claws. His heart raced as he fought to recover from the close call, but he was badly wounded. Beryl knew he needed a strategy, or he wouldn't last much longer. Normally, he would aim for the monster's head, but with its fire-breathing abilities, that wasn't an option. Instead, he decided to try flanking the creature, only for the Griffin to spot him and counter with a vicious tail swing. Quick to react, Beryl severed the Griffin's tail in one swift motion. The Griffin, enraged, retaliated by launching a massive fireball at him. Barely dodging it, Beryl had hoped the Griffin would become disoriented after losing its tail, but to his surprise, it charged straight at him. The Griffin crashed into Beryl with bone-shattering force. Though the impact sent waves of pain through him, he remained on his feet, using the moment to reposition and brace himself for the creature's next attack. But that proved even harder than expected. The Griffin suddenly took flight, with Beryl clinging to its back as it soared upward. A fall from this height would be certain death, and the griffin's struggle only made Beryl hold on tighter. The griffin's fury intensified, and when it finally descended, Beryl managed to leap off. But the creature wasn't done. It used its magic to heat the ground beneath it, turning the earth into molten lava. Beryl scrambled onto a nearby rock, doing his best to avoid being burned alive as the battle raged on. But Beryl isn't the only one in danger. The lava is quickly approaching the caves, and the young children trapped inside will be burned alive in mere moments. Hearing their cries for help, Beryl casts aside his own safety and dashes toward the danger. His boots provide some protection against the scorching ground, allowing him to move swiftly. He clashes with the griffin once more, but the creature's armor-like hide is still tough, and Beryl struggles to land a significant blow. The griffin retaliates by hurling another barrage of fireballs, forcing Beryl to desperately dodge and weave across the molten landscape. One explosion sends him flying, but he uses the momentum to his advantage, plunging his sword deep into the griffin's eye while airborne. The beast shrieks in pain, thrashing violently in an attempt to shake him off. The silver lining? The griffin is now partially blind with Beryl's sword embedded in its eye. The downside, however, is that Beryl is left without a weapon, defenseless against the maddened creature, which seems ready to tear him apart. Just as all hope seems lost, the griffin looks up, and from above, Serena swoops down. With lightning speed, she crashes into the griffin, sending it slamming to the ground. Before the monster can recover, Serena moves quickly, slicing its throat cleanly and ending the fight. She notices Beryl's broken sword still lodged in the griffin's ruined eye and immediately apologizes, feeling guilty for not having been there sooner. Beryl brushes off her apology, telling her that the children's safety is the priority right now. As if on cue, the kids emerge from the cave, mostly unharmed except for some minor burns. The group breathes a collective sigh of relief and heads back to the Adventurers Guild to report what happened. The Guildmaster is stunned upon hearing that they defeated a named monster. Serena quickly gives credit to Beryl, admitting that if he hadn't supported her, she might not have made it through the battle. Beryl tries to downplay it, reminding her that she delivered the final blow, but Serena refuses to take any credit. The Guildmaster, deeply impressed by their achievement, promises to repay Beryl one day for his efforts. For now, though, he extends an invitation to Beryl to join the Adventurers Guild as a full-fledged member. However, Beryl declines the offer without hesitation. Outside, Serena apologizes once again, admitting that Beryl only got dragged into the situation because she had been boasting about his strength. Beryl reassures her that it doesn't bother him, though he still feels unworthy of all the praise he's receiving. Serena insists that he truly was incredible in the fight, and she's thankful for the chance to fight alongside him. Beryl thanks her as well, acknowledging that her decisions were perfect, and it was her judgment that saved everyone. Serena humbly downplays it, but Beryl insists that she's grown into a fantastic adventurer and deserves all the recognition. The next morning, Beryl wakes up early, determined to fix his broken sword. However, since he's still unfamiliar with the capital's layout, he asks Kiruni if she can guide him to a blacksmith. He thanks her for stepping in to help on such short notice, but Kiruni casually mentions that she was already planning to visit the blacksmith, so it's no inconvenience at all. Alusha, of course, decides to come along as well, though not out of jealousy. She claims it's simply because choosing a sword is a serious decision and she wants to assist Beryl in picking wisely. Deep down, however, she knows she's missed so many opportunities to spend time with him, and she can't afford to let this one slip by. Eventually, they arrive at the blacksmith shop, where the owner, Balder, steps outside to greet Kiruni. But when his gaze lands on Beryl, he freezes, clearly stunned. It turns out that Balder was once one of Beryl's students. Despite being older than Beryl at the time, he had trained under him, believing that mastering swordsmanship would enhance his skills as a blacksmith. And judging by the impressive workshop he's built, it's clear that Balder's commitment paid off. With the group gathered, Balder asks what they need help with. Kiruni steps forward and explains that her short sword needs sharpening. Balder agrees and asks her to hand it over. Kiruni passes him the sword, and Balder inspects it closely, turning it over in his hands. After a long pause, he lets out a deep sigh, places the sword on the counter, and bluntly tells her it's beyond repair. She's completely ruined it. Alusha remarks that it's surprising, considering how meticulous and precise Kiruni usually is during training. If the sword's truly ruined, though, there's only one explanation, and Beryl quickly catches on. He turns to Kiruni, asking her what it feels like when she holds the sword. Kiruni pauses for a moment, then replies that it feels light to her. At that, both Beryl and Balder instantly realize the problem. They explain to her that if she can't properly feel the weight of her weapon, it won't be effective for her to wield. With that settled, they decide it's time for Kiruni to get a new blade. Beryl suggests she might be better suited for a two-handed greatsword. Kiruni may be small, but her strength is enough to handle the extra weight. He hands her a greatsword to try out, and while it feels heavier than what she's used to, it's still manageable. Confident she can handle it, Kiruni decides to buy it, especially since it was Beryl's recommendation. Plus, it looks great slung across her back. Now that Kiruni's situation is taken care of, Beryl starts looking for a replacement for his own broken sword. However, Alusha quickly interjects, insisting that someone of his skill should have a custom-forged weapon. Beryl, though, isn't convinced and figures that any good quality sword from here will suffice. As he continues to browse, the door suddenly bursts open and Serena enters, carrying a huge sack over her shoulder. The moment Alusha and Serena lock eyes, they start arguing, as always, unable to stand each other. Beryl steps in to break things up, redirecting the conversation and asking Serena why she's there. Sheringhand tells Balder that she has a special request for him. She slams a sack onto the counter, opening it to reveal a griffin's leg, proof of their victory. She asks him to forge a long sword from it. Balder is taken aback, as it's the first time someone has asked him to craft a sword from a named monster's remains. Though surprised, he's also curious why Serena would want a long sword, considering she's known for her twin blade style. Serena clears this up by saying the sword isn't for her, it's meant to be a gift for Beryl. Beryl protests, saying he doesn't deserve such a fine gift. He insists Serena should keep it, since she dealt the final blow to the griffin. But Serena is firm, saying that the sword is the least she can do to make up for Beryl losing his weapon in the fight. Balder chimes in, urging Beryl to just accept the gift, not because he's backing Serena, but because he's thrilled at the idea of crafting a legendary sword from rare materials. Reluctantly, Beryl agrees, though he tells Balder to keep it simple and avoid anything outlandish. Balder solemnly promises that the sword will be practical, but the gleam in his eye suggests otherwise. Balder estimates it will take a week to finish, and Beryl is fine with that. With errands done, Beryl suggests leaving, but Kiruni steps forward with a request. The scene shifts to the dojo, where Kiruni, holding a wooden replica of a greatsword, asks Beryl for private training. Beryl explains that the greatsword has two main advantages, its ability to deliver devastating strikes with wide, lateral swings and its enhanced control when gripped by the Ricasso. As Kiruni practices, she recalls her old training under Beryl, memories of perfecting basic forms with him at her side. Later, Beryl is walking home alone when a child approaches him. She tries to steal his wallet, but he catches her wrist before she can get away. In retaliation, the girl blasts him with fire magic, forcing Beryl to release her. She escapes into the night, heading to a dilapidated building filled with rough men gambling and drinking. She tosses a small pile of stolen money onto a table, but the men complain about her haul. Their leader silences them, warning that MUI knows better than to slack off, as she understands the consequences. MUI remains expressionless, knowing all too well how brutal her boss can be. But then she realizes something's wrong, she's lost something important. In her haste to escape, she dropped a ring. Beryl now holds it in his hand, unknowingly making his way toward an important discovery. The following morning, inside the bustling training hall, Kiruni tirelessly hones her skills with a recently acquired greatsword, its weight still unfamiliar in her grip. At the opposite end, Hemblitz engages in yet another sparring match with Beryl. Despite his persistence, Hemblitz hasn't managed to land a single clean hit on Beryl. Now, making one final attempt, he charges in and feigns a heavy downward strike, only to shift his blade at the last second toward Beryl's torso. It's a smart move, but Beryl effortlessly reads the maneuver and counters with ease, leaving Hemblitz bested once again. Breathing heavily, Hemblitz thanks Beryl for the spar, who in turn acknowledges his rapid progress. The tactic was sharp, just not quite fast enough. As Hemblitz catches his breath, his gaze drifts toward Kiruni. He remarks on her gutsy decision to switch to an entirely new weapon, noting the promising strength she displays even with limited experience. Their improvement isn't just personal. It serves a greater purpose. The Knight's Order must bolster its combat readiness in preparation for a confrontation with a dangerous gang called the Dark Hand of Twilight. Recently, these outlaws have begun operating within the capital itself, stirring unrest and drawing the attention of both the Royal Guard and the knightly ranks. With the thieves' base nearly uncovered, plans for an all-out raid are underway. Success will require every available fighter, and Kiruni's raw power could be invaluable. Still, Hemblitz jokingly adds that Beryl could probably handle the entire gang alone if he wanted to. But Beryl clearly has no desire to get involved with petty crooks. Hemblitz assures him the knights are more than capable of handling it themselves, which Beryl is more than happy to hear. He's never had much interest in tracking down common criminals. Just then, Beryl finds himself staring at a ring in his hand, the same one he took from the pickpocket the day before. He wonders if it could serve as a clue. Before he can say anything, Kiruni spots it and jumps to a wild conclusion: Beryl's planning to give it to someone special. Hemblitz raises an eyebrow, clearly thinking the same. Kiruni then bursts into laughter, teasing that if it's for Alusha, he might want to find a ring that doesn't look like it was made for a child. Beryl, visibly confused, tries to stop the growing misunderstanding and finally clarifies. The ring isn't a gift. He explains that he was nearly robbed yesterday. Some girl tried to pickpocket him. He caught her just in time, but she escaped after blasting fire magic in his direction. Kiruni finds that odd. If the thief really had access to magic, there'd be no reason to steal. Anyone with that kind of power could attend the Magic Academy without paying a single coin, all expenses covered. Hemblitz offers a theory: maybe the flame was produced by a magical artifact rather than true spell casting. Regardless, he asks what Beryl plans to do with the ring. Beryl shrugs and says he has no interest in keeping it. If it was stolen, he'd rather see it returned to its rightful owner. Taking Hemblitz's advice, Beryl heads over to the Knight Order's front desk and deposits the ring there, officially washing his hands of the situation. With that done, he considers the matter closed. After all, the thief didn't actually manage to steal anything from him, and he certainly has no desire to go chasing after her. Still, her expression when he'd caught her lingers in his mind more than he'd like to admit. Later on, as he wanders through the city, Beryl begins browsing property auctions, realizing he can't keep living out of inns forever. However, the staggering prices make his head spin. While his income as a knight technically covers it, dropping that much money feels excessive. As he mulls it over, he notices a girl behind him, anxiously scanning the crowd. Curious, he steps closer to ask if she needs help. When he sees her face clearly, he instantly recognizes her, the same girl who had tried to rob him the night before. He casually brings up the ring, wondering aloud if that's what she's looking for. At his words, the girl lashes out at him, assuming he's taken it. Not wanting a public scene, Beryl urges her to calm down. He explains that the ring has already been handed in at the Knight Order's desk and that he no longer has it. Obviously, she wouldn't be able to just stroll in and claim it herself. Then he asks her straight out if she had actually stolen it. After all, her desperate effort to get it back suggests it holds some deep significance. She replies firmly that she didn't steal it, and that's enough for Beryl. He tells her to come with him so he can help her recover it. Although she's hesitant, he points out that without his help, she'll have a hard time proving the ring belongs to her. With a reluctant sigh, she agrees to go with him, though her sour expression shows exactly how she feels about it. When they arrive at the Knight Order headquarters, Beryl retrieves the ring, but before handing it over, he asks for a quick word with her. Just then, Alusha appears, and upon seeing the two together, she jumps to conclusions, assuming MUI is some illegitimate daughter Beryl's been hiding. He quickly shoots down that idea. They all go inside, where Beryl explains everything in detail to Alusha. Once she understands the situation, she asks him what he wants to do about MUI. Ordinarily, Alusha would be expected to arrest someone for theft, but Beryl clearly doesn't want that. Instead, he asks MUI if she'd be willing to give up pickpocketing in exchange for her freedom. Rather than lie or dodge the question, she simply demands the ring back. Her bluntness makes it clear she has no intention of changing, but her refusal to lie about it strikes Beryl as oddly sincere, like a thief who's honest in her own way. Alusha recalls hearing rumors that MUI had used magic during an altercation with Beryl. Curious, she questions whether MUI wielded a magical artifact or if the ability was her own. MUI responds that she cast the spell herself. Hearing this, Alusha explains that if MUI truly possesses innate magical ability, the noble Kingbin would gladly assume responsibility for her care, meaning she wouldn't have to resort to theft anymore. MUI starts to slowly lower her guard and opens up, eventually admitting that she can't stop pickpocketing because she desperately needs $5 million. She confesses that her boss made her a promise: if she gives him that specific amount, he'll use magic to bring her sister back from the dead. But time isn't on her side, and earning that kind of money legally just isn't realistic for her. So, she turned to stealing. Beryl immediately realizes that her so-called boss is manipulating her. Resurrection magic isn't real. Still, he knows telling her that right now won't change her mind. Alusha then excuses herself, saying there's something urgent she needs to check on. With just the two of them left, Beryl gently asks if she wants something to eat. MUI declines, but her hunger is clear. Thinking quickly, Beryl steps away and returns moments later with a loaf of bread. As soon as he offers it, MUI snatches it and devours it without hesitation. Watching her eat, Beryl feels a quiet sense of relief. He's been concerned about her ever since he saw the pain in her eyes the day before, so being able to help her now, no matter how small the gesture, brings him some comfort. Once she finishes, Beryl hands back the ring she came for. With her mission complete, MUI says she's going to leave. But just as she's about to exit, Lucy bursts in, having been tipped off by Alusha about MUI's magical potential. Introducing herself as the head of a prestigious group of mags, Lucy enthusiastically invites MUI to train at a magic academy, making it clear they always welcome new talents. MUI declines the offer, insisting that joining the academy won't help her reach her $5 million goal. When Lucy presses her about the reason behind the hefty sum, MUI admits it's meant to pay a sorcerer who claimed he could bring her sister back to life. Upon hearing this, Lucy's tone shifts. She bluntly tells MUI she's being lied to, no such resurrection spell exists. But MUI clings to her belief, convinced she witnessed it herself. In her memory, she saw the so-called mage move her sister's body slightly, and in her overwhelming grief, it felt like a miracle. The man then demanded $5 million to complete the ritual. Since that day, MUI has turned to theft, determined to pay the price. Though Lucy is deeply sympathetic, she doesn't waver. She firmly reiterates that the promise of resurrection is a cruel fabrication, and no amount of money will change that. MUI lashes out at Lucy, accusing her of deception. But Lucy calmly counters, explaining that she's a highly esteemed mage who has spent centuries mastering the arcane. If resurrection spells truly existed, she insists, she would have known about them long before any obscure conjurer. Her words begin to shake MUI's confidence, leading her to suspect she may have been tricked. Lucy then presses her to reveal the identity of the magic user who made such claims. MUI eyes Lucy warily, questioning her motives. Lucy responds with cool certainty. She intends to confront the mage face to face to verify whether the man can truly raise the dead or if he's feeding false hope. If, by some miracle, his claims prove true, she promises to cover the $5 million required to bring MUI's sister back. But if he's a fraud, then he's disrespected the dead, something Lucy cannot let go unpunished. After a moment's hesitation, MUI reveals the wizard's name, Twilight, also the name of the infamous ringleader of the Twilight Thieves. Lucy immediately demands that MUI leave the matter to her. Lucia offers to assist, but her status as a knight would cause too much attention, so she asks Beryl to join Lucy instead. Soon, they arrive at the entrance of Twilight's base, and Beryl is taken aback that the hideout of a notorious gang sits just off a busy thoroughfare. He silently wishes he'd brought a real sword, but Lucy tells him his skills are more than enough, even with just a wooden blade, to deal with petty criminals. Without hesitation, she blasts open the front door, alerting the entire den. One bandit reaches for her chest, but Lucy reacts instantly, sending him flying with a burst of magic, dismissing him as an annoyance. She then tells Beryl to deal with the rest as she heads straight for Twilight. The other thieves catch sight of MUI lurking near the entrance and recognize her as the one who betrayed them. One charges at her in rage, but Beryl quickly intercepts him, jabbing the man in the throat with his wooden weapon. It might not be lethal, but it hurts enough to make them reconsider. The blow leaves no question, Beryl's not holding back, and neither is Lucy. While Beryl battles the enemies upstairs, Lucy descends into the basement to confront Twilight. The moment she enters, he activates a magical trinket, launching shards of ice toward her. But Lucy, being a highly adept mage, isn't fazed. She dissolves the icy barrage with ease. Twilight quickly switches tactics, pulling out another magical device that lifts Lucy off the ground using telekinesis. She instantly realizes this must be the trick he used to manipulate MUI's sister's body. Twilight doesn't bother hiding the truth. He arrogantly admits to using telekinesis to animate the corpse, deceiving MUI into believing he could bring the dead back to life. He mocks her for falling for such an obvious lie. He conjures a fireball, intending to end the fight, but Lucy has had enough. She retaliates with a powerful gust of wind that sends Twilight crashing unconscious into the wall. Meanwhile, Beryl is wrapping up the fight upstairs, having taken down most of the goons. One of them, barely conscious, starts ranting about how MUI should have been grateful to Twilight for everything he'd done. That comment pushes Beryl over the edge, and with a swift strike to the throat, the thug is silenced. Soon after, Lucy emerges from the basement, dragging Twilight's limp form behind her. She gives him a harsh ultimatum: come clean to MUI, or be knocked out again. Backed into a corner, Twilight confesses the truth: the resurrection magic was all a sham. MUI, overwhelmed by grief, realizes her sister is truly gone and that she had been clinging to a false hope. With the fight concluded and the criminals subdued, Lucy informs the group she'll summon the Knight's Order to make the arrests official. Shortly thereafter, the gang of captured outlaws is loaded into a prison wagon. Alicia expresses her gratitude to Beryl and Lucy for their help. But the matter isn't fully resolved. The artifacts Twilight had used were far too advanced for someone of his status to possess. It suggests a larger conspiracy: someone more powerful is orchestrating events from the shadows. As the prisoners are carted away, a mysterious figure, cloaked and concealed, watches silently from a distance. The stranger lifts a hand toward the wagon, and moments later, Twilight's body glows ominously from within. He dies in agonizing pain, silenced permanently. Later, the hooded man reports to his superior, confirming Twilight's elimination via a magical implant. The Pope, hearing the news, is satisfied. He still intends to repurpose the corpses Twilight had stockpiled for his own version of a so-called miracle, and nothing will stand in his way. That concludes the episode. Stick around and subscribe for what comes next. The following day, after Beryl wrapped up his training with the Knights, Alicia approached him with urgent news. She told him that during Twilight's escort the previous day, he suddenly exploded without any sign or trigger, leaving behind nothing but a mysterious magical device. The Magic Corps had taken possession of it and were currently investigating its origins, though no useful information had surfaced yet. When Beryl inquired about the missing bodies Twilight had been overseeing, Alicia explained that she'd already questioned his subordinates, but none had any idea what he had done with the corpses. All signs suggested that Twilight had been acting on someone else's orders. Their priority now was uncovering who had been pulling the strings. Later that day, Beryl visited the smithy to collect his newly forged sword, and he was honestly stunned by how beautifully it turned out. He was eager to try it out during his next session with Kiruni, but as he made his way toward the training hall, he noticed Lucy standing out front, clearly waiting for him. From her expression, he could tell it wasn't a casual visit. She told him there was something important she needed to talk about and invited him to her home for a private discussion. Not long after, they arrived at her residence, and Beryl was floored. He had no idea she lived in such an impressive mansion. While they walked through the entrance, Beryl asked about Mui, and Lucy replied that she was still working on convincing her to take up magic studies. Once inside, Lucy poured herself some tea before introducing Beryl to the man seated across from them. His name was Eyebrow Hellman, a priest affiliated with the Church of Sohin. Beryl greeted him politely, though he was puzzled as to why someone from the church would be there. Lucy explained that all the magical tools Twilight had been using originated from Sohin, and they'd found their way into his hands because of a corrupt bishop named Rivio Salin. In return for supplying Twilight with those devices, Bishop Rivio demanded he be provided with dead bodies. Suddenly, the reason behind Twilight's abrupt death by magical device made sense, but Beryl still couldn't understand why Rivio would want corpses in the first place. Ibro went on to explain that in the teachings of the Sohin Church, magic is considered a gift from the divine. Of all known miracles, the rarest and most sacred is the resurrection of the dead, a feat long thought to be impossible. While Ibro himself doubted such a miracle could truly be achieved, it was likely Rivio was secretly attempting to make it happen, which explained his need for the bodies. Given everything Ibro knew, Beryl asked why he hadn't stepped in already, but it turned out the situation wasn't so simple. Rivio was currently staying at the Sohin Church situated in the northern part of town, and the Night Order planned to summon him for questioning the next day. Ideally, he would comply, but there was a significant risk he might try to flee across the border. If that happened, and Rivio made it back to Sohin territory, the Knights would have no jurisdiction to pursue him. That's exactly why they're turning to Beryl. They need someone capable of stopping Rivos if he attempts to escape. Normally, either the Knights Order or the Magical Corps could handle such a task, but apprehending a bishop from Sohin by force risks igniting serious diplomatic conflict. Ibro lacks the strength to go toe-to-toe with a bishop as well. Beryl, on the other hand, is powerful enough to subdue Rivos and has no official ties to the Kingdom of Libra, which makes him the ideal choice politically. Lucia has already informed Lucia of the situation, and Beryl now has full authorization to use any means necessary. If Rivos tries to flee, if the allegations prove accurate, Lucy wants justice served. While Beryl doesn't have much interest in chasing down a bishop dabbling in resurrection, there's a possibility he could recover the remains of MUI's sister. She's not going to come back from the dead, but giving MUI the chance to say a proper farewell might help her find closure. With that thought in mind, Beryl agrees to take on the mission. Lucy thanks him earnestly and assures him he'll be well rewarded. As Beryl heads out, he nearly runs into MUI, who's just returning from the market. She clearly wasn't expecting to see him and asks what he's doing there. Beryl replies that he stopped in to discuss something with Lucy. Still, he admits he's glad to see MUI and relieved that she seems to be doing alright. MUI, however, struggles to understand why Beryl and Lucy continue to help her. She used to be a small-time thief and even tried robbing Beryl when they first met. Yet they saved her from Twilight, gave her shelter, and kept looking out for her. She couldn't understand why they bothered. Beryl could tell how overwhelmed she was. Her world had been turned inside out in a single night. He told her not to overthink it. No one here would ever manipulate or betray her the way Twilight did. She was safe now, and she had the right to live without fear. When MUI asked if it was really okay for her to just live, Beryl assured her that she more than deserved to move forward. He reached out to pat her head, but she batted his hand away, clearly irritated by being treated like a child. Beryl let it go, knowing she would open up when she was ready. A short while later, he left Lucy's home. That night, Beryl silently scouted the church in the northern district, watching for any signs that Rivos might be preparing to bolt. Sure enough, he spotted Rivos and his followers hurriedly packing up, clearly intending to leave the country. Beryl tried circling around to cut them off through the back, but a cloaked figure blocked his path. The man recognized Beryl immediately as the one who dismantled Twilight's entire crew, and apparently, he had been expecting him to show up. Beryl had anticipated trouble, but he still attempted to inform them that Rivos was required to appear for questioning the next day and was under a travel restriction. Predictably, the hooded figure disregarded the warning and summoned 3 armed fighters to deal with Beryl instead. He even authorized them to use magic, prompting the trio to link their swords and chant in unison, unleashing a spell that drastically increased their speed and strength. With their enhanced abilities, they became significantly faster, and Beryl braced himself for a serious fight. While the swordsman kept him occupied, Rivos and the hooded figure retreated back into the church to collect the rest of their belongings before making their escape. It had been a long while since Beryl had been forced into a fight where holding back wasn't an option. This time, it was kill or be killed. As the first opponent lunged, Beryl swiftly stepped aside and slashed him across the chest. Realizing how dangerous he truly was, the remaining 2 attackers teamed up to press him harder, trying to stall until reinforcements could arrive. Soon, Beryl found himself surrounded by 5 enemies, all empowered by magic. Even for him, this was a dangerous situation. Fortunately, he wasn't alone. Just as one fighter prepared to strike him down, a gust of wind knocked the sword clean from the man's hand. Faisal dashed to Beryl's side, declaring her support, with Karunar arriving close behind. Still, Beryl was puzzled as to why they had shown up at all. After all, he had been sent alone specifically to avoid dragging the Knights Order or Magic Corps into the conflict. The 2 assured him they hadn't come under official orders, they were simply nearby, saw he was in danger, and chose to intervene. Beryl wasn't fully convinced, but in truth, he was relieved to have help. The 3 quickly began pushing back their opponents. During one intense clash, Beryl locked blades with an enemy, only for the blue energy surrounding the man to suddenly vanish. The fighter froze, then collapsed, and Beryl knocked him out while trying to make sense of what had just occurred. Faisal suggested that the spell they used to enhance themselves was starting to wear off, leaving them weakened by magical backlash. With their strength fading, defeating them would be easier. Still, more enemy forces were closing in, so Faisal and Karuna urged Beryl to go after Rivios while they held the line. Grateful for their help, Beryl rushed into the church, determined to catch Rivios. But just as he neared his target, Spur stepped in to block his advance, giving Rivios time to start casting a powerful spell. Spur smirked, telling Beryl he was about to witness Rivios' ultimate goal, resurrecting the dead. As Rivios finished his incantation, several nearby coffins began to tremble uncontrollably. A few seconds later, their lids burst open as the corpses inside twitched to life. His experiment had worked, at least partially. These weren't truly revived beings but rather mindless husks animated by crude necromancy. Among them, Beryl spotted a familiar face, MUI's sister, and his stomach turned. He remembered how earnestly MUI had begged for her return. But this mockery of life wasn't what anyone had wished for. The reunion that should have been a miracle was instead a nightmare. One of the undead lunged at Beryl, grabbing at his ankle. Without hesitation, he brought his blade down, cleaving the creature's head clean off. Blue flames erupted from the severed body, vanishing it completely. Beryl moved with grim resolve, cutting down the others one by one until only MUI's sister remained. He had hoped to preserve her body, perhaps to allow MUI to say goodbye properly. But now, there was no choice. Gently, he wrapped his arms around her one last time and whispered an apology before driving his sword through her neck. She dissolved in the same brilliant blue fire, leaving behind only a ring that clattered to the ground. Before he could mourn, Spur came charging in with renewed fury. Beryl parried the first strike, but Spur was faster and more skilled than expected. A sharp pain tore through his shoulder as Spur's blade pierced him. Even so, Beryl refused to back down. He gritted his teeth, adjusted his stance, and counterattacked. When Spur swung again, Beryl narrowly dodged and delivered a slash to his opponent's shoulder. Spur hesitated, surprised that an older warrior could still move with such precision and force, even after using magic to enhance his own strength. But Spur wasn't done. In a reckless move, he plunged a dagger into his own side, turning pain into raw power. He came at Beryl again with a brutal flurry of blows. Beryl blocked what he could, but shallow cuts and scrapes began to multiply across his arms and chest. This was easily one of the fiercest duels he had faced in years. Realizing he couldn't win through force alone, Beryl changed tactics. As Spur lunged again, Beryl didn't evade. Instead, he let the sword strike his arm deliberately, using the moment of contact to disrupt Spur's momentum. It cost him dearly, the wound was deep, but it gave him the perfect angle. He lashed out with a swift, powerful slash, tearing across Spur's torso. That blow should have been the end, yet somehow Spur refused to fall. Even as the surge of backlash from his own magic enhancement ravaged his body, he dragged himself forward, barely conscious, blood oozing from dozens of wounds. He looked less like a man and more like a walking corpse, but he simply wouldn't stop. Beryl called out, telling him it was over, that he'd already lost. But as long as Spur could breathe, surrender wasn't an option. Beryl stood frozen, both amazed and unsettled by Spur's refusal to give in. But no matter how strong his will, the damage was done. His body finally gave out, collapsing to the floor without another word. With the fight ended at last, Beryl stepped outside and was relieved to see that Kiruni and Fisail had successfully dealt with Rivio. He offered his thanks for their swift work, then turned to face Rivio himself. The man didn't seem shaken or remorseful in the slightest. When they told him Spur had fallen, he only scoffed and said that Spur had been more than willing to lay down his life. Capturing him, Rivio claimed, wouldn't matter anyway, not unless they could perform some miracle of blood to save the world. Beryl didn't understand what the man was talking about, brushing it off as meaningless fanaticism. The following morning, Beryl visited Lucy to bring her up to speed on everything that had occurred. He still couldn't shake the guilt about not recovering MUI's sister's body. Sensing his mood, Lucy smiled and told him to come with her. She had a surprise. She led him to a charming house in the middle of town and, with a grin, told him it was his. Beryl blinked in disbelief. He'd been looking for a place to live, and now one had just fallen into his lap. Lucy encouraged him to check it out, and when he opened the door, he was shocked to see MUI sweeping the hallway. Stunned, he asked what she was doing there. Lucy explained that after their conversation the night before, MUI had finally agreed to enroll in the Magic Academy. But since she needed a legal guardian to do so, she would now be staying with Beryl, who would take on that role from here on out. And that's where this episode ends. Be sure to stick around for what comes next. It's been 5 days since Barrow settled into his new home. While he's genuinely glad to have a place with a garden and running water, the adjustment is still ongoing. On top of that, he's now fully responsible for looking after a teenager on his own. As Mubi comes downstairs for breakfast, Barrow asks how she likes the meal he prepared. Her response is indifferent, she says it's fine as long as it's edible. Trying to shift gears, Barrow offers to handle the laundry from the day before. Mubi declines, insisting she'll take care of it herself. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem, except last time, she just dumped water on the clothes and called it a day. An awkward pause follows until Mubi breaks the silence, not to start a conversation, but simply to ask if she can use the bathroom. Barrow gently reminds her that this is her home too, she doesn't need to ask for permission for things like that. Mubi acknowledges this and says she won't ask again, but the way she says it makes Barrow think this might come up again. He's worked alongside teens her age before, but actually raising one is a whole different experience. If things are going to work out, he'll need to break through her wall of distance somehow. He remembers Kirumi and Fiesel really like the skewers sold at the market, so he buys one for Mubi to try. When he asks if she likes it, she says yes, but her face doesn't really show much emotion. Looking for more ways to bond, Barrow suggests they go see a play at the theatre. When he invites her, Mubi agrees to come along. They watch the performance together, and afterward, they actually talk about it, a small but meaningful step toward building a connection. The next morning marks Mubi's first day at school. Barrow walks with her to show his support, even though she insists it's unnecessary. He explains that, as her guardian, he needs to at least visit the school once, not that he's particularly interested in the Magic Institute itself. When they arrive at the entrance, the campus turns out to be even bigger than Barrow expected, and it's clear they might need help finding their way. Just then, a woman walks up and asks if they're the new transfer student and her guardian. Barrow confirms they are, and she introduces herself as Kinera, one of the institute's teachers. She kindly offers to give them a tour, and Barrow gratefully accepts. He already had no clue where to begin navigating the place. As they walk down the hallways, Kinera brings up a question. She wants to know who recommended Barrow and Mubi to the Magic Institute. Barrow tells her it was Lucy. Kinera is caught off guard. She's surprised that the head of the Magic Institute personally invited them. But with a referral from someone like Lucy, Mubi won't need to go through the aptitude test and can get admitted immediately. Kinera then asks if Mubi has decided on her magic focus yet, but both Barrow and Mubi seem unfamiliar with the idea. Kinera goes on to explain that magic is divided into different systems, and most practitioners have strengths and weaknesses within them. So, Mubi will eventually need to select a specific path to focus on. Mubi says the only thing she can currently do is make fire, so Kinera figures that offensive magic might be the best fit for her. Barrow still looks a bit confused, so Kinera adds that magic generally falls into 5 main branches. Those are offensive, defensive, healing, enhancement, and lifestyle magic. Since fire generation falls under offensive magic, that's why she suggested it for Mubi. With that choice out of the way, Kinera moves on to asking whether Mubi would like to stay in the student dorms. Apparently, neither Mubi nor Barrow even knew the dormitories existed. Kinera offers to give them a tour, and they agree. She leads them through the girls' dormitory, which turns out to be massive. It includes a cafeteria that serves 3 meals a day, spacious baths, and private, fully equipped rooms for each resident. Mubi seems to really like what she sees, and even Barrow is impressed by the setup. Still, he's concerned about whether Mubi will be able to connect with the other students. She keeps her distance and tends to brush him off when he talks to her, so he wonders if she might be better off staying at home a little longer. Then it occurs to him maybe she's only cold toward him because he's older. She might get along better with kids her own age. While heading back, they walk past a sausage stand advertising some sort of special, so Barrow asks Mubi if she's okay with stopping there to eat. She doesn't mind, but when they enter, the place is packed with sausage lovers and there's nowhere to sit. Just as Barrow thinks they should leave, he hears someone calling his name. Turning around, he spots Serena waving. She invites Barrow to join her at her table, and he accepts. He and Mubi sit down with her, and Barrow takes the opportunity to thank Serena again for the sword she gave him. It came in handy recently. Serena brushes it off like it was nothing, but she's curious about Mubi and asks who the girl with him is. Barrow admits it's a bit of a long story, but the short version is that Mubi's now living with him and he's her guardian. Serena almost chokes on her drink when she hears this, but quickly apologizes after regaining her composure. Just then, their food arrives. As they eat, Barrow asks Serena what she's been up to recently. She tells him that there's been a spike in monster activity around the capital lately, mostly because a delegation from Sfindi is expected soon. Barrow hadn't heard anything about this, but Serena explains that it's a yearly event where allied nations gather, and the guild has to wipe out local threats to ensure the delegation's safety. After the meal, when they head outside, Barrow tells Mubi she can go ahead without him since he needs to stop by the Knight's order. Before she leaves, he mentions to Serena that Mubi just got into the Magic Institute and suggests she give the girl some encouragement. Serena is surprised to learn that Mu has magical potential, and she leans in, telling her to work hard because the students at the institute are no joke. Now that Barrow's looking after her, she better not fall behind. Mu shrugs and says she already knows how strong Barrow is, even if he's kind of an old man. That comment gets under Serena's skin, and she's about to blow a fuse before Barrow jumps in to calm her down. Serena says sorry for overreacting, but insists that Mubi needs to understand just how incredible Barrow really is. Mubi quietly says she already does. With that, Mubi says goodbye and heads home, and Barrow's a little taken aback. It seems like she actually got a bit more comfortable with Serena. Serena tells Barrow that Mubi's got promise. She's still rough around the edges, but she's honest and direct, which means she's got a bright road ahead. Barrow's happy to hear that, though he's still unsure if keeping her at home is best or if the dorms would give her a better foundation to grow. Later at the training grounds, Barrow brings up Mui to Alusha, wondering if living in the dorms might suit her better than staying with him. Alusha is flawed, mostly because no one told her Mui had been staying at Barrow's, but that's a topic for another time. Kiruni then joins them and says the dorms are ideal, no commute, regular meals, and a stable routine. Barrow is already familiar with the perks of dorm life, but he still worries that Mui might have a hard time adapting to being around other people. Hemblitz steps into the discussion, pointing out that the only real way for Mui to get comfortable with others is by spending time with them. Alusha also voices her opinion, strongly urging that Mui should move into the dorms, though her reason isn't exactly well thought out. In truth, Alusha just doesn't like the idea of Mui continuing to live at Barrow's place. Later that day, Barrow visits Lucy's office to hear her perspective on the matter. She agrees that the dorms are the most practical option, although she understands that Barrow has his reasons for being hesitant. While they're talking, Fee Sale arrives to deliver a report, and since she's there, Lucy casually asks her opinion on the dorm situation too. Fee Sale responds that the dorms are clearly the better choice because of how convenient they are, but she's also curious why the topic's coming up right now. Lucy reminds her about Mui, the girl who's going to be joining the Magic Institute soon, and Fee Sale remembers, especially since she might end up teaching Mui. Barrow is surprised and asks for clarification, so Lucy explains that with the shortage of instructors at the Institute, Fee Sale was selected to teach due to her exceptional skill. Fee Sale is quite satisfied with the recognition, and Barrow can't help but feel a sense of pride in her accomplishments. Still, his concern about Mui remains unresolved. Suddenly, Barrow gets up and leaves, needing time to think things through. He's been doing everything he can to give Mui a stable life as her guardian, and he was genuinely happy when she chose to stay with him. But after seeing how excited Mui was while exploring the dorms, he realizes what the right decision probably is. Not long after, Barrow returns home carrying groceries, and as he sets the bag down, Mui immediately asks for his help with something. She's been hearing odd sounds coming from inside the dresser and can't figure out what's causing them. Barrow goes over to check it out, crouching down to listen closely, and sure enough, there's a faint noise coming from inside. He moves the dresser aside and discovers a small hole in the wall. Moments later, a group of rats scurries out. Mui barely reacts, used to living around rats all her life. Barrow, however, snaps into action, determined to eliminate them. He manages to chase one out of the room, but the other two dash under the table, making it hard for him to land a hit with the broom. Thinking fast, Barrow takes off his shirt and tries to use it to trap them, but the rats are quick and keep slipping away. Eventually, Barrow snaps and overturns the entire table, crushing one of the rats beneath it, leaving just one left to handle. He follows the last rat into the bathroom, where it darts around the bathtub, forcing Barrow to try catching it with his bare hands. He would have no trouble grabbing it if it were a person, but the erratic movements of a rat throw him off, causing him to swipe blindly. The rat keeps slipping past him, even scurrying over his arm to dodge his grasp. Just as it's about to make its escape, Mui suddenly intervenes by igniting a small flame to block its path. The rat is startled and leaps backward, hesitating just long enough for Barrow to catch it in midair. With the final rat secured, Barrow is surprised and grateful that Mui stepped in to help, especially since she didn't seem concerned about the rats before. Later, he borrows some rat repellent from a neighbor to prevent any more intrusions and heads back to the kitchen to start preparing dinner. He begins to realize that Mui might not be as aloof as he first thought. She came to him when she heard the commotion and even assisted in catching the rat, despite claiming it wasn't important. Seeing her willingness to work with him makes Barrow think she might be warming up to life at home. Right then, Mui walks into the kitchen, and Barrow lets her know that dinner is still in progress. To his surprise, Mui offers to help him cook, a gesture that lifts Barrow's spirits, suggesting she's becoming more comfortable with their arrangement. Not long after, the two of them sit down to eat, and Barrow thanks her for the help. She brushes it off but mentions that she's aiming to improve her cooking so she can eventually take over making meals. Barrow is slightly confused, since the dorms provide all student meals. But Mui quickly explains that she doesn't want to live in the dorms, she would rather stay at Barrow's place and commute to school. Barrow tries to convince her the dorm would be more convenient, but her mind is made up. She says Barrow has always treated her with kindness, and she wants to return the favor by supporting him however she can. Touched by her words, Barrow agrees to let her stay, recognizing how much she values their time together. That brings episode 7 to a close. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.